is Aaron Taylor. I'm so grateful to be able to bring to you this week's a very special edition of the Ministry Forecast. You know, normally when we do the Ministry Forecast, we're doing a church or a ministry of the church in the local area. It might be a parachurch organization. But today is a special day. Some of you will have watched last week as we had Scott Stewart with us, and he shared a pretty tragic and emotional story. And we're going to be talking today about forgiveness and about this story. And as we do, today we're going to kind of catch you up if you didn't watch last week. And then he's going to share a little deeper about what's happened in his life that has actually become a great positive to something that the devil meant to destroy us with. God brought it about something good.
Right.
So just take a second, introduce yourself, catch the audience up to where we're at in the story of your life.
So, as I had mentioned, Aaron, from last week, we had went through the story about what had happened with my mom and dad, and hence that he had taken her life, and there were some
pretty violently.
Yeah, very violently, and it really kind of sent me a bit into a tailspin. Very numb, very unemotional, not able to feel, not able to make a lot of reality out of things. And I had reached a point in the story last week where I realized that after a couple years after that event had happened, that I was headed down the wrong road, and the train was picking up speed and heading down the tracks, and I could see what was happening, and I could see that I was letting people down, and that my character was no good, my word was no good, I wasn't honorable, and I was running from those things.
So can you take me back just a little bit? Because last week, one of the things that I thought it was interesting is he did a little bit of a last-ditch effort to blame you for the murder of your mother.
Right.
And explain just quickly what that was like.
Sure.
You know, as you realized that if he could, he would just blame you for it.
Well, I suspect that, and hence the detectives had told me this, that, you know, it's amazing what happens when a in this case a criminal is put behind bars and they have time to think, and they have time to rethink about, gosh, that didn't go like I thought it was going to go, and maybe I want to change direction now. And so what they believed happened was that because he admitted to, after a day or two, he admitted to the murder, and which instantly in the state of Oregon, you automatically waive a trial, boom, you're in. We head straight to the front of the room, and we go for a sentencing. And after a few days of sitting in jail and realizing, oh, hey, I don't think this is the direction I thought this was going to go. And so hence that's where, when I went and saw him in jail, you know, he looked me right dead in the eyes and said, man, I didn't do it because I was covering for you because I thought you did it. And so we believe that's where that came from. Now, as I had mentioned last week, he was a very manipulative man, perfected the craft, and he was very good at guilting people into getting them to do things that he wanted them to do for his agenda, not for their agenda. And so that, you know, that when you live in that world, Aaron, when you're brought up in that, that's really all you know. And so as crazy as this sounds, when he said it at the time, it didn't strike me as so, oh, this is weird, because he had done that kind of head games to me all my life.
Right.
I know that's hard for some people maybe to grasp.
Well, I think for some it's actually really easy to grasp because they've lived.
Fair enough.
Maybe their dad didn't go to that extreme, and there's a lot of people that listening to this going, well, this is what happened to me. And I think more people realize what it is because it's part of our culture.
Right.
In fact, we actually praise people who are good at manipulating other people often.
It's sad that it has come to that, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's sad. So I'm going down the path here, and there was something that I didn't add in last week that I'll I'll put in with this as well. When it rains, it pours. And because of something you just said, what happened was about 45 days after this explosion, there were 3 young girls that came forward that said, hey, I never wanted to say this and I never wanted to admit to it, but years ago he inappropriately touched me and did things to me. When it rains, it pours. Well, unfortunately, these 3 were also somehow connected to the family. So these weren't strangers. These weren't people we didn't know. No, we knew them. We loved them. Looked at them as family, as if they were family. So now, not only is there all of this, but now there's the humiliation. Because they understand this all went public. This didn't stay under the radar screen. I mean, it made the local news stations. It made the paper. It made the neighbors were talking about it. People that my folks were involved with in the different communities and the civic groups. It was pretty ugly. You walk into a public store, into a grocery store, and you just sense that people are looking at you because they saw your picture on the TV or on the newspaper, and you know what you're associating that with.
Because you're 22 years old at this point.
I'm 22, just a kid with no foundation.
But they don't protect your identity at that point.
No. They could care less about that.
Yeah.
I remember I was back at the property a few days later, and just standing out front, and this car pulls up, and this person gets out and starts asking me questions, and I said, "Who are you?" "Oh, just getting information for the county." And so I answer, and all their questions. Comes to find out it was a newspaper reporter that purposely deceived me to get information for the report. And and I'm so numb, I'm just not even smart enough to protect myself to say, I'm not going to talk to you. So ugly things that happen. But anyway, fast forward along, Aaron, is that we get moving down the way, and a couple of years later, I realized that I can't keep going in this direction, and I've got to start making some changes. And the good news is that people the good Lord puts people in your path at the right time, at the right place, with the right message. I firmly believe that. I'm living proof to that. And the $1 million thing in that is not, are they the right people or the right message? Is this that, are you open-minded to hear what's being said, or are you so closed-minded? And I guess to say is that I've always been somewhat open-minded to getting that feedback. And so as I started going through some counseling and started getting my head put back on straight, by this time I'm saved, I accepted Christ, and I'm starting to deal with all of these things, that the hurts and stuff from even 10 years ago, 15 years ago, these things started surfacing up through counseling. And I was holding on to a lot of anger, a lot of resentment. And I guess to say justifiably so. I mean, there was a lot of things that were done to me that I didn't have control over. But it's as I started to work all these things out, and I started to reach a point where I was letting things go, letting the anger go, letting the bitterness go, the resentment, the fact that I didn't have my mom anymore at Christmas time, at Thanksgiving, instead of just burying it.
The year of first, huh?
Yes. I reached a point where I kind of went, ooh, yeah, now it's time to forgive my dad for what he did. And I didn't want to do that. I mean, that meant that I was going to have to let go of some things, but I also thought it meant that I was going to have to open myself back up and trust him again, and have him come back into my life, which was not going to happen. It was not going to happen. And I think last week that I had talked about that I'd heard the message that from a pastor that he had said that just we have to forgive him, but that doesn't mean the same as have to trust them again. And so that was a turning point for me, because I was able to separate those two things and understand that, okay, I'm not ready to trust him again. Don't know that I will ever be ready, but I think I'm ready to forgive him. And what does that mean? What does that even look like?
I think the number one most freeing thing for anyone who's been hurt, especially when it comes to things like this and like molestation, is realizing that I can let go of this. I don't have to punish that person, and they cannot. I can let them not punish and continue to punish me. But but if it comes down to me having to trust them, and I think that aspect of trust is needed to build a relationship.
Right.
You have to have some form of trust to build a relationship, but you don't have to trust to forgive.
That's correct. That is absolutely right. And it's that, as I mentioned last week, and I just love the parallel, is that when we get bit by a snake, it's not the snake bite that'll kill us.
Right. It's
the venom that starts circulating through our body. It's not the bite, it's the venom. Right. And I had venom that was circulating that I needed to let go of, right? I needed to get rid of.
And unforgiveness gives us that. Huh?
Absolutely, absolutely. So I was a Christian by this time, starting obviously to learn Scripture and learn what that meant and learn of His salvation for me, His plan for me, His dying on the cross for me, and all these things. And as I grew spiritually, as I grew even far matured as I'm going through getting my head on straight and stuff, I realized that I had to let go of all these things because it was weighing me down, and I was not happy with myself. I couldn't make my relationships with any girlfriends I had, couldn't make them work. I was, that anger comes out in other ways. It's the simple analogy. You take an orange and you squeeze that thing, what's going to come out of it? Orange juice. It would be crazy to think that apple juice, prune juice, grape juice is going to come out. Whatever is put inside that is what's going to come out. And with me, what was coming out was anger, bitterness, no grace. I just wrote people off. And I needed to make some changes. And so as I started to seek forgiveness, I started praying, and I was such a new Christian, I didn't even know what I was praying, but it was, Lord, show me how can I get past this? How can I possibly get past this? Because I don't want this to destroy the rest of my life. Right. I mean, I literally remember, Aaron, I remember saying that. I don't want this to destroy the rest of my life. Because I'd seen what it had been doing to me for the last few years.
And a lot of people say, well, but you don't understand what I've been through. Well, I think you do. But, but at least to some degree. And I will say this. I preached a message years ago about bitterness. And I said, bitterness, it's a choice. And it was a series of messages. And to this day, if I say something about, well, boy, that makes me bitter, and people look at me and go, that's a choice. And you hear that all the time around here because of that very fact that it is a choice that we have to make. We can either release people through forgiveness, or we're going to remain bitter. We think it's not affecting us. It's eating us up.
Absolutely, it is. Absolutely.
So it is a choice. It is a choice to forgive. Right. It is a choice to be bitter and angry. We all have times where we're angry.
Right.
The question is it going to be out of control? I had a counseling this week with a young man. He said, I have an anger problem. I said, no one has an anger problem. We all get angry. It's that we have a control problem when we get angry. A big difference. Yeah. And, so I think people are pulling along here with you because we've all, I know I have, even maybe not to this degree exactly like this, but we've all had those people that we've had to face. It might be an ex-husband, an ex-wife. It might be a family member, a friend who's betrayed us.
Absolutely. Right.
But those times where we got to decide, am I going to let this destroy me? Because what's coming out of me is not pretty. You watch somebody in a divorce situation and you bring up their ex, and I've been there. Just all that comes out is nasty, ugly.
Yep. Their whole body language changes.
Oh yeah.
I mean, it's really
their demeanor's different.
Absolutely. And there are people who have been through even more horrific things than I've been through. And I have said, when I've shared this message, or I shared this story with different church bodies and at groups, I clearly say that. This is not about Scott's story and how wild and crazy it is or how intense it is. It's that regardless of what you've gone through or the deck of cards that's been dealt to you, it's all about how you play them. And bitterness, unforgiveness, it all is a choice. And as I watched in front of my own very eyes, realizing I couldn't make my relationships work, I was in no place to be married because I would have screwed somebody's life up. Right. And certainly not in a place to have kids. Right. I could just tell.
'Cause why mess up children too?
Absolutely. That's so. For me, there was multiple aha moments that said, I just can't do this anymore. And so as I started to seek the Spirit in how to forgive and what that looked like, I started saying it out loud. And I'll tell you, at first, it was all a lie. I have to be very honest. It was a lie because I didn't. But as I said that, and as I said that, and as I started in my brain, in my head, in my thinking, I started to say, what good is hanging on to this doing? It does no good. Anybody that could sit there and tell you and say, oh, it does a lot of good to hang on to that. No, come on, be honest. Right. It doesn't. But see, people get the message mixed up, Aaron. They think that, well, if I forgive him, I'm just letting him off the hook.
Right.
I'm giving him a free pass for what he did. No, it's not. No, it's not. You're separating.
That's where people love to quote this.
Yeah.
But that's where it is. You're not the judge.
Yeah.
You may have to hold someone accountable.
Right.
And your father had to be held accountable.
Right.
But you're not his judge.
No.
And I think that's so important because we want to feel like, no, you say the truth, you speak the truth, and let it go.
That's right.
What we're not saying is cover up, hide. If you're being molested, don't tell anyone. We're not saying that.
No.
If you're being molested, if you're being hurt, if you're being abused, you need to get this out. The truth needs to be spoken.
Amen.
Forgiveness doesn't mean you'll reestablish a relationship. Forgiveness means you're going to let them be held accountable and you're going to release them from where they can continue to hurt you and hopefully others.
And you're no longer going to be a prison to that anger when you think about it or it gets brought up when someone comes up to you and says, as they have me, gosh, I don't want to bring it up, but...
Aren't you?
Yeah, or have you ever talked to your dad since?
Yeah.
And I mean, that's happened dozens of times.
Yeah. Well, I think I said that off camera.
And so if you have fully let go of that, it's easy to sit here and talk about it because I have let go of it. But again, it's so important. People put the connection of forgiveness in with giving them a free pass. I'm excusing what they did. Oh, I have to trust them again. Those are all different things. So, and that was the growing part for me where I learned that. And once I got that, once I separated those and put those in different categories, it became much more easier to forgive him. Now, with moving on with that, Aaron, is that I love, I think it's Matthew 18:22, that it's Peter asks Jesus, he says, how many times should we forgive him? Should we forgive him 7? And you kind of almost wonder there in the animated, he thought, oh, 7's a lot. Should I forgive him 7 times? And Jesus comes back and says, how about 7 times 70? And you could just imagine he was probably blown away of like, what are you talking about? Here's the conviction for me, Pastor. Here's the conviction for me, what that scripture means. Christ was God in the flesh. He was like you and I. He had felt all the same things that you and I felt. I got to tell you something. After this event, and after I started getting my head on straight, and after I started to give forgiveness to my father, every Christmas, I would have to forgive him again. At every big event, I had to forgive him again.
Because he kept reoffending you.
Absolutely. I had to forgive him another time when my buddies and I would get together and we'd go up on the mountain and we'd build a big bonfire and do target practicing, skeet shooting. Their dads were there. Mine wasn't. I had to forgive him again. And the day my daughter was born, I had to forgive him again. And do you see the connection where when Christ said, how about 7 times 70? Because each time all these significant events to me rose up and I was there, again, that the sadness, but the anger of my dad is not here. And because of him, my mom's not here. And I had to forgive him one more time. Over the years, I have forgiven him countless times because I refused to hang on to that anger. Mm-hmm. Even just as often as a couple months ago, prior to filming this, something happened. And you get in that, almost that pity party of, if my mom and dad were here, things would be so different. And about 20 seconds of wallowing in that, and I'm like, nope, no. I refuse to go down that road. You can't live your life on what if, should have been, I wish it was. You can live your life on the choices that you make today, and I choose to forgive. I consistently choose to forgive him.
So if somebody's out there, and I know that many of you are, and you're listening and you're saying, I just don't think I can bring myself to forgive, what really is happening is that you're building up, not just by releasing it over and over and over, we build up anger and frustration and bitterness. So you might say, well, just forgive them once and for all and you're good. Well, I think we all should do that. It's a release. But what happens is, in traumatic events, those things come back to haunt us. Yeah. And the way to release them is if they come, that's when you turn the cheek, as it would be said. Right. That's when we say, no, this is not going to be able, I'm going to release this. Right. So now you and your dad, you're best buddies, it's all good, you trust him. Where are we at?
No. So that's funny. So what happened, I've forgiven him, but he doesn't know it yet. Now he's in prison at this time, and I've got little kids, and I'm married, and I kept wondering in my head, okay, if he were to get out tomorrow, if he were to get out early, and our paths crossed in the grocery store or the department store, could I look him in the eye and talk to him, or would I turn tail and run? What would that look like? That was my $1 million question. How could I face that? Because I'd forgiven him, but I wasn't sure I wanted to see him. I wasn't sure I wanted him to be involved in my life. And I prayed about it. And honestly, Pastor Aaron, it took probably 3 years before I finally got the answer. And I'm not saying this is for everybody, but this was for me. And that was, write him a heartfelt letter, let him know exactly how you feel, and send it to him. It wasn't a face-to-face interview. I didn't need to do that. I was willing to do that, but that's not the guidance I got. Right. So I sat down one day, wrote him a letter, and I shared with him that, I forgive you. And despite all of the horrible things you did, despite that you took my mom's life, you changed my life, and other people in the family, all of the guilt, all of the manipulation, the things that you did to embarrass the family, embarrass me. I mean, I laid it all out. I said, I forgive you. I hold no ill feelings, no bones about it. And I also said, this is not an invitation to come back into my life. Right. I have 2 kids, I have a wife, and I've worked hard to overcome all of the dysfunction and all of the things that you raised me with. This is not an invitation for you to bring those things back into my life. And I sent him the letter. And as I had heard, about 6 months later, he actually was released early. He got out early. And the feedback that I got from she's my half-sister, was by adoption. She was my half-sister by adoption. She goes, well, he got your letter. And I said, yeah, I thought he probably did. And I said, not that it matters to me, but what did she say? And she said, well, he thought that you pretty much thought of him as and I can't say it on camera, right? And I said, well, no, not really. I mean, because if that were the case, that would mean I'm still harboring ill feelings, and I really don't. And I hope that he can find some peace in the last years of his life. That's truly, and I truly mean that.
Right.
I hope that he can find some peace in the last days. To this day, I've never made contact. And I'm pretty public, right? It's easy to find me. I'm not hiding.
So he is out there.
He
is
is
not
out.
in prison anymore.
He got out, and he went into a halfway house, as I understand it, where like kind of to rehabilitate him right back into society. And I don't know where he lives. I know the town he lives in, which is not far from here. But our paths have never crossed. Interestingly enough, his path almost crossed with my wife's twice, very close, but our paths have never crossed. And I'm okay with that. I'm at peace with that. If he were to pass tomorrow, I don't know that I would even need to go to his funeral. I'm just at peace with it. I really am.
Right.
And holy cow, has it been a process? It's taken a while to get to that point.
So it's not always about reintegration into a relationship.
Right.
At the same time, if God really began to lean on you, do you think you could with His grace?
With His grace and that direction, I do. And understand something.
Because for some, they have to. And others,
That's
they
correct.
don't.
That's correct. And I think, not that I'm anybody special, but I always, Pastor, up front, I always had that, I left that door open with God. And I said, if this is something I have to do to go face Him, I'll do it. So it's never been one of those things for me that said I didn't want to. And I don't know what I would say to Him.
Right.
Maybe the chance to pray with Him. I don't know. But
well, maybe He'll watch this show.
Maybe.
Well, if you're interested, I know we've went over time. They're going to have to edit this down a little bit. If you're interested in getting a hold of Scott or his ministry, how can they do that? How's a way they could get a hold of you?
I think you can find me. Facebook's pretty popular today, so it's pretty easy. You can just type in Scott Stewart, and I'll pull up there, Junction City, Oregon. That's one way. Another one, can I give my email? Is that fine? If you want to send it to scott@scottstewart.net, that's another great way to reach out to me. And
Awesome.
I have no problem interfacing with people and helping people through the struggle, because forgiveness it's not, in my opinion, it's not a one-time event. It's an ongoing event. And I'd be glad to support people in that.
Thank you for being with us. Hope you'll see us again on the Lane County Ministry Forecast.